Welcome to Blanton's Baseball, everyone. I'm your host, Al Blanton, and today we welcome a 12-year MLB veteran who played for the Dodgers, Pirates, Braves, and Astros, Sid Bream. Sid, thanks so much for joining us today.
Al, it's great to be back with you, bud. It's great. It was good to get to know you, and it's good to be back with you.
Well, it was great to have you at the conference, and it's good to reconnect. And let's just go ahead and dive right in. I want to go all the way back to Carlisle and Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania. Kind of paint a picture of life back then and talk about, some of your fondest memories growing up.
Very good. Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania was where I was raised. I was born in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. But my mom and dad had 6 kids. I was the third one. Back then, Al, it was something that, especially during the summertime, you woke up, you were out of the house until your mom rang the dinner bell to come back for supper. You were out playing up at the park, kick the can, whatever. And, I had a great upbringing. My dad had to work 3 jobs, worked 48 years at Madison's Carpets. But he worked 3 jobs at times in order to put food on the table. I mean, so we weren't well to do. But my dad loved us. My mom loved us. And I'm thankful for that. But some of my greatest moments growing up were literally watching my dad, watching my uncle down on a sandlot team. I love my dad was a tremendous pitcher coming out of high school where he pitched, I think it was 46 innings his senior year and struck out 98 guys. Had a chance to play with the St. Louis Browns, but a bad knee as well as a grandfather that didn't want him playing on Sundays because of the Sabbath day. And that took him away from playing on Sundays, but had a great upbringing. I couldn't change anything. I really, truly loved it.
You've said in multiple interviews that your dad was your hero. Who are some of the other guys? And this could be locally or college-wise or professionally that you idolized.
My dad. Back then, back then you had one game in the course of a week. Saturday game, you had a Saturday baseball game. I grew up liking the St. Louis Cardinals because my dad liked the St. Louis Cardinals. My oldest brother was named after Stan Musial. His name's Stan. And so I liked the St. Louis Cardinals, but I really didn't idolize anybody. I loved watching them because my dad loved them. My whole joy literally came from watching my dad and my uncle play sandlot baseball. I had so much fun doing that.
You really grew up during the heyday of sports in Pennsylvania. When you think about the 70s, you think about the Pittsburgh Pirates winning a couple of World Series. You think about the Steelers winning 4 Super Bowls. What was the sports culture like in Pennsylvania overall at the time?
In all truthfulness, Al, we didn't get a lot where I'm situated a little bit east of the center of Pennsylvania. And back then it was more Philadelphia Phillies and Philadelphia at sports than it was Pittsburgh sports. Yes, we knew about the Pirates winning. We knew, going against the Orioles and so on and so forth. But in all reality, we didn't we didn't get to see them again. And again, my dad, because of the Sabbath, we didn't get to watch a lot of sports. So that was when the Sunday sports were playing. So we didn't get to see a whole lot of that. But it wasn't until I was brought over to the Pittsburgh Pirates that the viewer activity started to change to Pittsburgh. Now the cable companies, people were calling in and saying, "Hey, you need to get the Pittsburgh Pirates on our station," and so it started to come there. And now it's probably a little bit more Pittsburgh than it is Philadelphia.
Do you remember the first Major League Baseball game you attended in person?
I remember going to not Comiskey Park, but the old Philadelphia Stadium. not Veterans Stadium, but the one even before Connie Mack Stadium. I remember going to a game there, and I remember going to a game in Baltimore because we were actually closer, I think, to Baltimore than we were to Philadelphia. And I remember, this is what I remember about that night, Al. I remember sitting there with my dad, and somebody spilled a beer on us, and I've never seen my dad get so mad in all my life. So that's what I remember. But I do remember just how much fun going to one of those games and what it was all about. I mean, the fun that we had going as a family.
Did you grow up kind of dreaming about being a professional baseball player, or was that something that came about later?
No, in all truthfulness, Al, it wasn't until, I mean, things, as I shared with the kids today, I mean, as things went well for me, I mean, I tell the story of when I was 12 years old, our coach said, for anybody that hits a home run during the course of this year, I'm going to give you a half gallon of ice cream. And this is an 11-game season. And I hit 24 home runs in that 11-game season. So that's how my life went. Everything was going good. But I really and truly didn't have any thoughts about professional baseball until my 12th grade year when a scout came up to me and said, man, you have a chance to get drafted. And that's when the wheels started to turn a little bit. And I started thinking about playing professional baseball.
Let's skip ahead a little bit. You went to Liberty University, which was a big deal for you, had a great career there. But in '83, you joined the Dodgers. Talk a little bit about that time and what was it like to play for Tommy Lasorda and play alongside guys like Pedro Guerrero and Fernando Valenzuela?
In all actuality, Al, I was drafted in '81. That's when I went to the Dodgers, second round of the June draft, and obviously coming up through the Dodger organization was a phenomenal thing. I mean, being at spring training and seeing the Steve Garvey and Ron Say and Rick Monday and Steve Yeager and Davey Lopes and Billy Russell, and I mean it was just a phenomenal. I mean, they were it back then. Get to meet Sandy Koufax and you know, obviously, as you said, Fernando Valenzuela was on the team and Pedro Guerrero. Obvious. I was one of those as a rookie back then. You had respect for the veterans, and literally when I went to the Dodgers, my chair faced into my locker all the time. I never ever peeked out of my locker because of the respect I had for the players. I mean, I didn't speak until I was spoken to. That was just something that was common thing back then. And Tommy Lasorda, I wasn't the greatest Tommy Lasorda fan. I mean, he was great in front of a camera, but take him off the camera if you weren't one of his boys. I mean, he wasn't the greatest coach in the world, but obviously he bled Dodger blue, and he had some great teams, and I'm certainly proud of all that he accomplished, but just wasn't really a Tommy Lasorda fan.
What were some things that you learned from some of those guys during that time, just kind of getting started with your career?
Uh, I don't know, Al, what I could really say. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, I'm trying to think of what my hitting instructor was for the Cardinals or the Dodgers. I will say this: when I was in spring training, just getting started in my career, I was hitting well over 400 after I got drafted from the Dodgers. I mean, my first year in minor league baseball with down in Vero Beach, Florida, and Hernandez, who was the traveling hitting coach, came to me and told me, he said, "You can't hit like that." I mean, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm hitting 400, I'm smoking the ball. I mean, what are you telling me? I can't hit? But because I didn't want to upset the cherry cart, I mean, I conformed to what he wanted me to do. I used to tuck my hip in big time. I mean, to make sure that I was keeping myself in on a pitch. And he said, "You can't hit like that." And so I changed everything. But even with all that, I mean, things went very, very well for me in the minor leagues, and had some decent years in the big leagues.
You're traded to the Pirates in '85 and eventually became the starting first baseman. What did it take for you to, finally get over the hump?
What it took was the Pittsburgh Pirate management saying we're going with a young team, because literally Jason Thompson, who was the first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates, he had a much better spring than I did. And by if you were going on stats as far as spring was concerned, I mean he would have been the first baseman, but the Pirates had made a move to go with a younger team, and fortunately I was a part of that, and that got everything started for me.
What is a player's mentality when they're a young player, a rookie, second year player, and they may not be getting as much playing time as they can? Are they just waiting on their chance, or are they, continuing to try to ramp their game up? What is it like to be in that position and be looking at, from the outside looking in?
I mean, every day. I mean, I think the biggest thing is you're trying to glean some wisdom. Manny Mota, Manny Mota was the Dodgers hitting coach back in with the Dodgers, and I remember trying to listen to him quite a bit as far as when I got to the big leagues, and talking to him as far as hitting was concerned. But and I share as well. When I was with the Dodgers, I mean, I started in 1985 with the Dodgers because Greg Brock, the first baseman, was hurt, and I was leading the team in home runs and RBIs, and he got better, and I got sent back down, and I was irate. I mean, I was sitting and thinking, it's my time. I mean, as you hear athletes, it's my time, it's my time. I'm sitting there saying, it's my time. And I was really ready to quit, because all they were using me for was an insurance policy. When somebody got hurt, I'd be back up in the big leagues, and then as soon as they got better, I was back down. And so when I got traded over to the Pittsburgh Pirates, it was one of those, Al, that people come up to me and say, "Man, you got to be ticked off. You just went from a first place team to a last place team." I said, I said my goal was to get to the major leagues, and it wasn't going to happen with the Dodgers, because Tommy Lasorda loved Greg Brock, and Al Campana, as the general manager, like Franklin Stubbs, who was coming right behind me. So humanly speaking, I wasn't going to play for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I was thankful, for the opportunity to get over to the Pittsburgh Pirates and get my career started.
The next year, a guy by the name of Barry Bonds joined you with the Pirates, and his first year he only hit 223. But could you tell early on that he was going to be a superstar?
He's the whole package. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that he was going to be a great player, and obviously he came with some other emotions into the clubhouse. It changed people's perspective on him a little bit, but he had everything. He had speed. I mean, he didn't have the greatest arm in the world, but he had a fair arm. But he had speed. He had power, and he had the background with his parent, his dad, to be a good player, a great player.
Chuck Tanner was your manager when you got there in Pittsburgh, and Jim Leland took over the next year. What was it about Leland that made him a great manager?
Jim Leland was number one. He was a great psychiatrist. I mean, he knew every one of his players, what made them tick, what they needed, whether a kick in the pants or a joke to get them to relax. He knew what he was doing with each player that he had. At the same time, he was always, in my opinion, he was always 2 or 3 steps ahead of every manager that he ever coached for. I mean, he knew what he was going to be doing, an inning or two down the road. And one of the things that, and I literally heard it said last night. I mean, as far as the Pittsburgh Pirates up here playing in Pittsburgh, I mean, when they got the first run on the board, their chances of winning were so much greater. And Jim Leland understood that, and that's when Barry Bonds got on first base. Jay Bell was going to bunt him over to second base, and we had Andy Van Slyke and Bobby Bonilla, and then myself, in order to try to knock him in. And if we got that first one on the board, we knew that we had a better chance to win the ball game than if we were down a run. So he was just a phenomenal individual, and I'll just say this: I mean, I had a great friendship with him, still do. I When I left here, it was a hard time for me leaving him and the team. to go to Atlanta. But we actually named our third son, his middle name is named after, Jim Leland. I mean, Austin Leland Bream. So that's how much I thought about him.
I'm a former college basketball coach, and when I think about speaking to the teams, my teams, when I coach, you give pep talks, sort of like a Hoosiers type pep talk. And is it different in Major League Baseball? Kind of take me into the locker room a little bit when you were playing. Is there a lot of rah-rah stuff, or is it just mostly matter of fact? And how do managers approach the game?
I mean, most of the time out, I mean, understanding that it's such a long season. I mean, it's a day by day game. You don't have any time in between. So I mean, it's more or less, you guys, we messed up today. Let's get them tomorrow. Keep focusing on that. But if you got sloppy in your mental game, you weren't playing the way you're supposed to. I mean, at that point in time, I mean, I remember Jim Leland up in Montreal. When we played up in Montreal, we were playing lousy. I mean, just mentally, we weren't into the games. We weren't doing, and he came in and upset the food cart, and just left us have it. I mean, and we got the message. But Jim was always on your side. That was a nice thing about Bobby Cox as well with Atlanta. I mean, he was always on your side, whether you were right or wrong. They were always going to take up your side and then explain later maybe, you were probably wrong in that situation, but I'm gonna stay, have your back.
He knocked over the food cart. Do you remember what y'all were having that day?
I do remember a salad going everywhere, and I think it was pasta.
Let's talk about '89. That was kind of a difficult season for you, one of the toughest seasons of your career. You had season-ending knee surgery, and what did you learn during that time?
I learned to keep on persevering, and I would also say, Al, that the lesson that I learned there was accredited to back in 1986 and 1987 when I started the season on a bang in my rookie season with the Pirates. Started the season with a bang, went into a bad slump. Did the old God, why are you doing this to me? Got mad at God. Went to the 1987 season, started the same way. I mean, and then at some point in time, I mean, in May again, I went into my worst slump at that time of my major league career. And I got so mad that I finally called my coach up from school, Al Worthington, and he asked me this question. He said, being a Christian, if God wanted you to have a batting average of 190, could you do it? And I mean, I had to get on the phone and say, no, I don't think that I could. And he made me realize at that point in time, said that my identity right then was in baseball. It wasn't on Christ. It was in baseball. And I needed to make sure that I was doing everything that I could in order to honor and glorify him during that time frame. And so taking that to the 1989 season, yeah, it hurt. I mean, tearing up my ACL, getting surgeries, not knowing back then whether or not I was going to come back from an ACL surgery and so on and so forth. The perspective of that I learned in 1987 with my coach helped me to understand that it's more about, keeping my eyes on him, and he got a plan for me no matter what. And whether it was baseball or something else, and just keep persevering, keep getting back up on the horse when you get knocked down, keep getting back up on the horse. And if God says no to baseball, like I said, he has something else.
I want to talk about the Braves in just a minute, but a lot of times when your name is mentioned, some people will talk about the slide, obviously, and they'll mention how slow you were going around the bases. I mean, obviously, a lot of people don't know that you had knee surgery, but does that bother you that people say things like that?
I mean, at that time, Al, I was slow. I mean, good grief. I mean, with the knee brace on, and three surgeries on my right knee at that time, one on my left. I mean, I was slow prior to my knee surgeries. I mean, if you go back to 1986, I led first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates in stolen bases. I'd go first and third with the fastest on my team because I knew how to run bases, and I ran a 6.8 60. I mean, and that's not fast, but it's pretty doggone good for a big boy. And that's where I was as far as my knee before my knee surgeries. But I mean, I think the slide, as you talked about, Al, I think that all played into God's design. Because I mean, if I would have been faster, there wouldn't have been a play at the plate. I would have been across the plate. I mean, I beat the thing by 4 inches, and everybody was able to be excited about the play. So I mean, I'm thankful I was there. Bobby should have had me there. I mean, he should have had a pinch runner for me for sure. But I know that it was all God's design for me to be there, and I'm thankful for it.
I mean, even at your slowest, you're faster than probably 99% of the population.
I would hope back then, yes. Today, no.
So let's talk about the Braves. You joined the Braves in 91, and the first 2 seasons you're with the club, you go to the World Series. Even though those teams came up just short, how do you kind of assess those 2 years?
I mean, just an incredible. My most fun year in the game of baseball was 1991. I mean, watching a team, getting with Terry Pendleton, Charlie Lee Brandt, Rafael Belliard, getting with those guys, Bobby Cox allowing us to have team meetings without him micromanaging everything and just start to talk to those David Justice, Ronnie Gantz, Tom Glavine, Steve Avery, John Smoltz, Jeff Blauser, the whole list of them. Great ball players, but they didn't have the understanding of what it meant to go out there and be a team and to win ball games, and to watch that team, slowly change their attitude to the point where, obviously after the All-Star break, we were down before the All-Star break by nine games. We come back and we won 9 straight games after the All-Star break. And then it was just a dogfight between then and the end of the season with the Dodgers. To watch that happen and then to watch a city adopt us, I mean, it was just a phenomenal year. I mean, it was, I just had so much fun playing in that arena.
It was really a truly iconic time in the history of the franchise. And let's talk a little bit more about your teammates. I'm going to name somebody, and you just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. I want to start out with Terry Pendleton.
Leader. I mean, definitely. I mean, just, and again, he is the epitome of a leader. I mean, 92 MVP as far as his batting average. I mean, MVP. But Terry Pendleton was one of those individuals. When he had a guy on second base with nobody out, I watched him lay bunts down to get the guy to third base, just so that he could put David Justice the opportunity for him to score, drive in a run, to create that atmosphere on a team to say, hey, we're a team. This isn't about me. Today that's one of the things to me that is missing big time. The analytics of the game says don't try to get the guy over to third base. I mean, just try to drive him in. And I mean, and you lose that team atmosphere. It's all about me getting the things done. Terry Pendleton was the epitome of a team player, team atmosphere, and just a great captain.
Ron Gant.
Popeye. I mean, the guy was ripped. I mean, he was absolutely ripped, and could hit a ball a long way, and just a delight to have on the team.
Deion Sanders.
Fast. I mean, unbelievably fast to the point that he beat me in a race going backwards. That's how fast Deion Sanders was, but at the same time, incredibly intelligent, incredibly articulate. And, I used to have I had some great conversations on the bench when I wasn't be playing and Deion wouldn't be playing. We had some great conversations on the bench all the time. And, just thankful for how he's doing now.
John Smoltz.
Some of the best stuff in the game ever. Obviously starting off, He had a lot of psychological aspects, issues going on, but by far had some of the best stuff ever in the game of baseball. Great friend, very articulate, and I just enjoyed, and also a great golfer.
I want to do some rapid fire questions right now, and just let's try to make this quick. But let's start out with this question: who was the one guy that you would say was a really, really good player, but folks really don't know how good he was?
I'm, I think Al thinking about this a little bit. I'm gonna say Steve Avery. I mean, Steve Avery in 1991 was our lights out pitcher. I mean, going into the World Series, going into the National League Championship, he was just incredible. I mean, and people just don't recognize that. He went to Boston, got his arm got hurt, but Steve Avery was an individual that just really deserved a lot more recognition than what he got.
This is a tough one. Who's the toughest pitcher you ever faced?
My second hit came off of Nolan Ryan. I mean, and so a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people, when you ask that, you're going to sit there and say, man, think about who was the hardest throwers back then. Dwight Gooden, I think I have a 346 batting average off of Dwight Gooden. Mike Scott from Houston, I got multiple hits off of him right off the get go before I started to see how much his ball moved. Great pitchers. I was terrible at ballers early on. Guys that never give you anything to hit. They were always mixing the plate, always staying on the edges. And I would roll over the ball so many times and get hit into double plays. Later on in my career, I started to learn that they're not going to give me anything to hit, and I started to drive the ball left center field. But the one guy that I always say, in all truthfulness, it was Dave Dervecki. And Dave Dervecki really generally threw me two pitches. He threw me a straight four-seam fastball underneath my elbows, and he threw me a cutter that started on the half of the plate and broke away from the plate. And I just could never get on board with him. I think I got one hit off of him. It was a broken bat single to center field. And but he would I don't know if he just had a better relationship with the Lord at that time or what, but he was a nemesis for me.
Favorite ballpark?
San Diego. San Diego, I mean, I don't even remember what the old ballpark was before they're into this new one, but it was a beautiful ballpark until football came in September. And as soon as football came and they started chewing up the infield and putting ruts all through the field, then it wasn't as pretty as it was. But just unbelievable, the atmosphere, the obviously the temperatures, the weather out there. It was just a beautiful place to play.
Who was the one player during your career that you met that you would say had a certain presence about him?
Greg Maddux. I mean, most individuals you can see insecurities in them. Greg Maddux, I mean, you didn't see insecurities in him. He knew what he was doing all the time, and he just carried himself. He carried himself. I mean, tremendous on the team, in the locker room, and you never had any doubt where Greg Maddux what he was thinking.
What about some Hall of Famers that you've met? Who kind of stood out to you about?
Well, who's the Hall of Famers? I mean, I obviously Smoltzy, Tommy Glavine, Greg Maddux. Who's some of the other ones? Good grief that
Jack
I've.
Morris.
Well, yeah, I don't like Jack Morris because he got me up there. But Jack Morris, obviously, again, good pitchers know how to get out of tough situations. And I mean, Jack Morris, the seventh game of the World Series that year when he was pitching against John Smoltz. I mean, Terry Pendleton had a guy on third base with less than 2 outs, and got him popped up in the air. Obviously we know about Lonnie Smith, but that's so easy to do in a stadium that's so loud. You don't know where the ball's hit. He was stealing. It wasn't a hit and run, so he didn't know where the ball was. And, so that's a difference. I had the opportunity with bases loaded with 1 out. And, Jack Morris, I mean, threw me a a splitter down and in, and I hit it to first base, and he got a double play on me. So good pitchers. I mean, that's the thing about Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, Tommy Glavine. They know how to get out of tough jams. Steve Avery. I mean, they know how to get out of tough jams. I mean, you just got to tip your hat to them.
Outside of the slide, what is probably the most memorable moment of your career?
Oh, I would say this. I mean, when I got traded or free agency down to Pittsburgh, I mean, the story, if you don't know, Pittsburgh came out after the 1990 season and said, I was a free agent, and said Sid Bream's our first priority to sign for the 1991 season. And so my wife and I were ecstatic, thinking, man, we're going to get a multi-year contract. We got a great team. We're going to be here in Pittsburgh. We're going to stay in Pittsburgh. But through negotiations, they never even got close to market price, let alone anything more for being their first priority. And so free agency opened up, and the Atlanta Braves gave me a great offer and said, you need to make a decision. So we made a decision to go down to Atlanta. But that whole night, my wife and I cried our eyes out. I mean, literally. Got up the next morning, called Jim Leland, my manager, and said, Skip, am I bound to this contract? And he said, no, we're not, you're not bound to. You haven't put your signature on it yet. So at that point in time, I called my attorney, who was Robert Fraley. If you remember the story of Payne Stewart when he went down on the plane, Robert Fraley was in that plane with him when he went down. But I called my attorney, Robert, and talked to him for an hour and a half. He was trying to tell me, he said, you're making a wrong decision here to stay in Pittsburgh. I was going to stay in Pittsburgh. And then finally he made this comment. He said, what happens if they sign you and then they trade you down to Atlanta? You're going to look like an idiot. And I said, great thought. Let's go to the Pirates and ask them for a no trade clause. So we went to them and asked them for a no trade clause, and they said no to a no trade clause. And I said, if I'm your first priority, I'd hate to see what your last one is. So I'm getting to where it's at. Okay. So I go down to Atlanta. We come back up to Pittsburgh for the first time. I don't start the game because Big John Smiley, big left-handers pitching, and so Bobby Cox gave me the night off. At that point in time, we got killed that game, 9-1. It was 9-1 going into the last inning, and Jim Leland put in Stan Belinda in the last inning to do the last inning, and with that, Bobby Cox put me up to the plate to pinch hit. So when they announced me to come up on to go up to the plate to pinch hit, the people in Pittsburgh gave me a 5-minute standing ovation. I mean, which, again, the emotions came out of him, and my eyes were watering, my knees were knocking, could not believe what they were doing for me. And then, with all that going on, again, you have to have all your faculties in game of baseball to hit a baseball. I mean, for me, going up there with my eyes watering, my knees knocking was not all my faculties. Somehow I swung the bat and I hit it over the center field wall. And out of my 90 home runs that I hit in my career, Al, that was the only one that I ever hit the straight dead center. I mean, most of my home runs were right center field to the right field line, and I'd hit some to left field line. But that was my only home run that I ever hit to just dead center field. And when I came around the bases and stepped on home again, the people gave me another 5-minute standing ovation. I mean, and that was just, it meant a lot to my wife, myself. It was just a big moment for us.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Blanton's Baseball. Hey guys, this is Al Blanton, the host of Blanton's Baseball. We hope you're enjoying the interview today. If you like this content, we ask that you subscribe and continue to follow us on our journey as we interview former Major League Baseball players. And we're back with Sid Bream, and we were just talking about a 5-minute standing ovation that you received. I want to talk a little bit about your faith. That's something that is immensely important to you, and you've had an opportunity to share your faith all over the country. What does that mean to you?
I guess the only way that I can say it is I have a Father in heaven that loved me so much that he was willing to send his son Jesus Christ to come and die for me, even though I was messed up. As Romans 5:8 says, but God commendeth his love toward us, And that while we were still sinning, while I was messed up, he died for me. I mean, and to me, um, knowing, going back into history, understanding, you know, and I know a lot of people say, man, it's all about faith. It's all about faith. It is about faith, but at the same time, we have to understand that, all the disciples, I mean, they are in history and in antiquity, they are known, and there is historical proof for each one of those disciples. And my challenge to each one of us out there today listening is, why in the world, would the disciples that had a 3.5 year ministry with Jesus Christ, why in the world, if there was nothing that took place, why in the world, if he didn't rise from the dead, why would they be willing to be martyred for their faith? They wouldn't do it for a lie. Would you or I do it for a lie, Alan? Absolutely not. But I mean, they were willing to die for their faith because they knew it was true. And I know it's true. I know that Jesus Christ loved me and he gave himself up for me. And all the other things of this world, all the other things of the fame, the fortune, the money that's there, doesn't hold a hill of beans to the fact that Jesus Christ loves me. I mean, and I know that one of these days, when my days on this earth are over with, I know I'm going to be with him in heaven. And that's for a lot longer time. I mean, that's for eternity, not a temporary time, but that's for eternity. And I mean, and I find joy and I find peace and I find happiness in knowing that my Jesus loves me no matter what I've done. I mean, Romans 8:1 says, but now there is no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. Even if I would be the messed up, murderer or something like, God still loves me and he died for my sin and I could come to him no matter what. And that's why I love Jesus and that's why I talk about him.
Well, we've got to talk hunting a little bit.
Ooh, I love that too now.
That's another love of your life.
Absolutely.
Is there any way that we can get a glimpse of your trophy room? Can we?
Oh, let me just take you over here real quick and just show you a little bit of
Give us a little tour.
Just a little tour. So let me that's a black bear. Got a bunch of a deer over here. There's a caribou, and there's a Nyala from Africa, and there's some mule deer there, and there's a nice elk. And then I got some more whitetail. There's another nice elk over there. And then I have my kudu from Africa and my gemsbok. And then I have a Dall sheep from up in Yukon. And then up here, I have a couple African animals. And then I have my buffalo that I took with a bow. And I got a couple things here. So, and then down here, I have a alligator. And I have my zebra rug. And I know a lot of people, they say, the zebra, how could you kill a horse? But so that's just a little bit of my hunting stuff. I mean, I enjoy God's creation. I mean, every place I go, I enjoy just being out in his creation and the opportunities that I have to be able to do all that.
Is that something you've been doing all your life, or is that something that you started to pick up later in life?
I grew up in a hunting family. I mean, back then it was for sustenance. I mean, literally to get a deer, get some rabbits and pheasants. I mean, that was food that my dad didn't have. I mean, obviously it was some sport too, but it was also food that we could put on the table. And, so I grew up in a hunting family and that's where the love of it came about. But after my days in college and my days in baseball, it just got bigger and bigger. And like I said, I just absolutely love it. I'm getting older now. Now it's my turn to try to teach my grandkids a little bit and love that part of it. But I love the outdoors and I love the thrill of the hunt and I love being a part of it.
Out of all the places you've been hunting, what's your favorite?
My favorite is probably elk hunting when they're bugling with the bow. I mean, there's nothing like being out west, having them. I mean, I've had 400 plus bulls. I don't have a 400 plus bull up here, but I've had a 400 plus bull coming across the meadow with some cows and coming in right at dark, but just bugling his head off. I mean, I've had them within 15 yards of me, bugling their head off, and I mean, the hair stands up in the back of your neck. I mean, I'd say this. I mean, I've been moose hunting a couple times. I've never gotten a moose yet, but I mean, hearing a moose grunting and coming in is also pretty fascinating. But I love elk hunting, and I wish I could do it more.
How long is gun season in Pennsylvania and bow season?
Pennsylvania starts the gun season starts now. It used to be the Monday after Thanksgiving, and now it starts the Saturday after Thanksgiving, but it's only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So they have 2 weeks afterwards, and then another bow season comes in with muzzleloader. And you can use most places up here, you can use a rifle still, which unless you're up north in bigger areas, I don't understand why they're allowed to use rifles up here. I mean, but because you're hunting a lot of times with houses just around you. But I'm only a bow hunter out. I only bow hunt. I don't do any more gun hunting, and except for varmints. I mean, coyotes and groundhogs and stuff like that. But so that's what I enjoy.
You know, it's different down in Alabama. We've got our gun season runs for, and I'm a gun hunter. That's why I'm talking about that. But I mean, ours runs from 1st of November to about the 1st of February. So we've got a long time to gun hunt. And I know it's different in some of the northern states.
Has it stopped there, Al? With I mean, it used to be you could get a deer a day. Is it still the same way there now, or
I think there are some limitations now.
okay? I
Yeah.
mean, there used to be. I mean, there used to be so many deer down there that they put you can get a deer a day. I mean, I've hunted. I used to belong to a hunting club down there, and I'm trying to think of where it was at one point in time. But I just found out that all the people that lived there were getting all the good spots, and I was getting the bad spots, and it never was really profitable for me. So I got out of it. But Alabama's a great place. I mean, great place to hunt.
Yeah. I think there's some buck limitations, and maybe the reason why I don't know the answer to that question is I'm no threat to shoot that many deer at any point. So, one thing I want to do, and I've got this little vault that I put together, and I've got some Sid Bream baseball cards in here, and I want to kind of, and this is my own personal collection, so I want to kind of pull out a few, if you'll just sort of entertain us for a second with this. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, I grew up collecting baseball cards, and I mean, back then, like you would go to the local, grocery store, or you'd go to the gas station, you'd pick up packs of baseball cards, and then you'd build your set. And so, as a kid, you would get very familiar with the faces of baseball, as you're building your set and you're putting them in teams, or so I want to pull out some cards, and it's really cool for me to start to meet some of these guys and put a name to a face with Blanton's baseball. But let's take a look at this one. This is a 1989 score, and you're with the Pirates, and
Bad swing right there, Al. I mean, I opened up too quick. My bat's dragging behind. I know that I didn't hit the ball well on that one.
good looking photo though. As a photographer, that's not too bad of a picture. Maybe not the greatest swing in the world, but good looking photo there. We've got the 90 score. So that was the 89 score. We've got the 90 score, crouched down at first base there.
Can you see whether or not I have my on the front there? Do I have my brace on the right knee?
No, no, this must have been previous to that. So
They must have taken it prior to that and then put it out that year. But
yeah.
T90 was when I had the brace on my knee.
Yeah, got the eye black ready to go.
Man,
Three River Stadium.
I think that's actually spring training right there.
Okay. All right, and then we've got the 1992, and this is a stadium club. And this one
Yeah.
is with the Braves. Pretty
Spike
cool.
Owens, Spike Owens running from Montreal, and I had to go in outside the base in order to catch the ball. And I mean, you know, that's one of the things that I prided myself a lot on, knowing what to do around the bases to get outs. But yep, I mean, I've had 100. I mean, if you can believe it, 12 years. There's been 189 different cards made that you know of baseball cards. So I have a big portfolio of them downstairs that my wife got me, but it's not all 189 of them at this point.
When they were doing baseball cards, you know, for the teams, was there a day when you had a photo shoot, or was it something that was, you know, maybe a little bit more organic? How did they do that?
Sometimes they were impromptu. Sometimes I mean they were set things. I mean that they ask you to do certain things in order to get the picture done. Obviously, that one right there with Spike Owens was, you know, that was just somebody taking the picture. And even all of those that you showed me so far there, Al, those were all action shots. But they did have times where they'd sit you on the steps going out of the club or the dugout, you know, sitting your arm up and propping yourself up and posing for a picture. So there were those as well. But you know, just depends on what they wanted at that time.
Was that kind of cheesy, or did the players kind of like that?
I think most of them thought it was all cheesy. I mean, every spring training you had to go through. They would do a photo shoot of you. I mean, they'd have different booths set up around that you just go from one to the next to do a photo shoot. And we didn't like doing that, but I mean, we were made to do it because of you know, of your team contract and everything. But we were not generally ever really happy about doing something like that.
Yeah. All right, last one, and this is the 92 Upper Deck.
I think that was a home run right there, babe.
All right, let's review. So we got the 92 Upper Deck, we got the 92 Stadium Club, we've got the 90 score, and then we've got the 89 score. So out of those cards, Mr. Bream, which one is your favorite?
I would say probably the 92, knowing what I did with that particular play. I mean,
This
I
one,
like the
this one or this one?
that one.
Yeah, the Upper Deck.
Yeah, I mean, I know what happened with that ball, and so I'm a little bit proud of that one.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's just been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time and just sharing your story and your faith, and just all the other stories and good times from your baseball career.
Thank you, Al. I mean, I enjoyed getting to meet you down in Alabama, and I thank you for having me down there. But I wish you the very best at this. I mean, you asked some really good questions today. I mean, and I'm proud of that. You made me think a little bit more than most people do. So I wish you the very best in your podcast, and I hope they become a very big success.
Thanks so much, man. For Sid Bream, this is Al Blanton. We'll see you next time on Blanton's Baseball.